Okay, you used two great words that are going to provide for a great transition back to Gene. Finagle and finesse. I know that a great wordsmith like Gene Arnold must have appreciated that. So uh, Gene, as a tireless advocate type in City of Chester for a lot of years now, what do you think about what Malcolm was just talking about, that the need for people, for advocates and political leaders, to build bridges and create understandings?
Well, I think I appreciate your F words there, Malcolm.
I try to keep them clean.
They were had polysyllabic, so you had several syllables there, so that was good. They weren't monosyllabic words, so that's good. But having said
So
that,
you just taught me something today. Like always teaching.
I hope I said that well.
Building Community is an award-winning video series created by the Chester Housing Authority to stay in better touch with its residents, staff, and the general public during these times of social isolation. Thank you for tuning in as Executive Director Steve Fischer and Ulysses Butch Slaughter bring interesting guests to discuss important topics of the day.
I am Jean Arnold, and I'm a migrant from the segregated South to the North. I came here to work with Scott Paper some years ago. Prior to that, I went to college in the South, segregated schools, and then came to New York to work with a Fortune 500 corporation, and then moved to Philadelphia area to work with Scott Paper. If you work with people from Scott Paper, you got to know a whole lot about Chester, because you meet people and folks introduce you to their friends, and you get involved with family and church and that sort of thing. At any rate, that's how I came to this area. And while I was working at Scott Paper, the Urban League asked a number of corporations to allow their Black MBAs to work at Cheney University, because Cheney was starting their business department and they needed faculty. So some of us went to Cheney to teach classes, and I taught a class there that was consumer behavior for a while. And that was my first, I guess you might say, formal start at teaching. I think I've actually been a teacher all my life. I think I was teaching when I was a kid back home, trying to help children in my classes understand their work that was not so easy for them to do. And later on, I started to, I guess, pay attention to the school district. I started something here in the area some years later, and became very concerned about the gap between the potential that Chester has and what was actually being realized. And I thought a number of things that were happening were not right, were not good for us. And I've been an advocate for making that change until today. So that's the short version.
And Malcolm, you look like you might have been a few years behind Jean. So when she was already officially teaching, you were probably learning either from her or others like her. What's your story?
Yeah, maybe just 1 or 2 years behind Ms.
I
Arnold.
doubt that.
Well, I was to do the same. I was born in West Philadelphia, Philadelphia kid who migrated out to Delaware County. I didn't go that far as what Ms. Arnold did. Is from the South, but growing up in West Philly, I just go back to a little bit of my story is that I was a victim of gun violence in Philadelphia, and being a victim of gun violence, where I lost my little brother, began my advocacy work with reducing gun violence and trying to, clean up the streets, of Philadelphia. And that's what really got me involved into politics. And as I moved out to Delaware County, I continued to do work in Philadelphia. It wasn't until one of the local elected says, it's great that you're coming back, but we need you to do work for where you live at. go to Chester, and that's what started, my passion to continue to do work to where I'm from, the people that I look like, people that I feel like that I can help. So I decided to make sure I put my time, my talent, and my and everything that I could to help help Chester City. So there I worked for elected a member there. And then I started to work with Congresswoman Scanlon, and then now I'm currently the director of government affairs for PHMC, which is public health. And I thought public health was a good transition to get into because, that's the one thing that affects us all, and there's always a gap into the healthcare resources in our community. And I wanted to be able to, one, identify those gaps and be able to, provide the resources to fill those gaps.
Yeah, couldn't be truer what you just said. And if we didn't know it already, we certainly learned this past year how important health is, and how important it is to understand the history of health, and why it affects different groups of people, or adversely affects different groups of people differently. You mentioned working for Congresswoman Scanlon. You mentioned working for another elected official prior to that. Who was that?
Sure, I was out there working with State Representative Brian Kirkland.
And I think you were his chief of staff.
Yeah,
right?
I was his chief of staff for about 3 years, where one of the things we wanted to do was continue just to help the community and help progression for the city. He and I are the same age, and we was just looking to push the envelope and pick up the baton and keep showing leadership from a young Black male perspective. One of the things that I feel like that's not there is the representation of younger Black men inside of politics. And one of the reasons why I got into politics again is because I wanted to start to influence others around and show that you don't necessarily have to be, what they say, a square to be in the politics. And one of the other reasons why I like to present myself in t-shirt and fitted hats is because I would like to relate to the people that I come from, to show that you can always be yourself and also care for your community. And it's not corny to also care for your community. So I just want to be, one, relatable to that, and also, inspire those to join in, because we can't do it alone.
Yeah, I want to stay with that for a second before we bounce this back to Jean. So one of the things that I like that you bring to the table is, oftentimes there's political people, and then there's other people, advocates, activists, but they're never one and the same. It's kind of like there's two sides. And someone like you've worked in the political world, so you understand the realities and the challenges of that. They're not necessarily bad meaning group of people. That they have to work under a certain set of challenges that the rest of us may not understand. But now you're, let's say, for lack of a better term, on our side of things. But you bring the understanding from the political side as well. So I think someone like you can help bring people together from all sectors, and that's one of the reasons we asked you to join us here, and appreciate that. So you want to expound maybe upon that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like from the advocacy part of it and from the political side, is more of a bridge that needs to be created. A lot of times with the advocacy, some advocacy groups feel like the politicians don't necessarily go as far, and then sometimes the politicians don't really have a connection with the advocacy groups. And one of the things that I have is that experience, one, working in the advocacy space and also working inside of a elected member's office. And you just try to marry the two and try to find a synergy where both parties are happy. One, holding the elected member true to what the community needs and what the advocacy group needs, and also setting real expectations to advocacy groups to understand that it's just not a bowl in a china shop. You just, some things you just can't come in and force down people's throats, and there's ways to maneuver and work some of the priorities to the table, and being able to finagle and find that finesse to sit at the table with elected members while putting your priorities up is just a skill that's necessary. And I try my best to be that whisperer between the advocacy groups or the community organizers and the politicians themselves.
Okay, you used two great words that are going to provide for a great transition back to Gene: finagle and finesse. I know that a great wordsmith like Gene Arnold must have appreciated that. So Gene, as a tireless advocate type in City of Chester for a lot of years now, what do you think about what Malcolm was just talking about, that the need for people, for advocates and political leaders, to build bridges and create understandings?
Well, I think I appreciate your F words there, Malcolm.
I try to keep them clean.
They had polysyllabic, so you had several syllables there, so that was good. They weren't monosyllabic words, so that's good. But having said
So
that,
you just taught me something today. Look, always teaching.
I hope I said that well. But having said that, I think that great and effective advocates are shrewd, and they have great people skills, and they're able to speak the truth and find a language that makes it easier for folks to hear the truth. Oftentimes, if you have a need to speak the truth, that means that somebody has been violating it. And you need to put some sugar on the end of the spoon, so to speak, so folks can take their medicine. But in doing so, still remain in relationship with people so that you can work with them. And that, for me, is what I call favor. And I am always, always appreciative and amazed at the favor that God has given me with people, because I can say hard things to folks, and invariably it is accepted. Now, I must admit that I've spent a lot of money and time learning how to do that. And what I mean by that is I have gone into training with people skill organizations to learn just that. And so there is a skill to it. But yes, I think we need to keep our bridges open always, because if we don't, we really shut down the ability to solve the problem. And all of the stakeholders who are in this problem situation, sometimes we call it a mess, and we have to redefine the mess and put it in language where people can hear it, understand it, agree to it, and then begin to work on it. It's like the saying that says, you have to make the vision plain, write it down so the people can run with it. And so having that bridge there, I think, is extremely important. But you must not sacrifice the bridge for the truth. You have to make both of those entities work together.